Yeah, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm going to try to tell you my story in a very brief time, and later maybe we can just have coffee and finish the rest of it. When I was a little girl, growing up in the West, I wanted to be Annie Oakley, thus my turquoise. It has been my signature for my entire life. I wanted to be Annie Oakley. I was growing up in a peach tree utopia, literally, in a little town of Pleasant Grove, Utah. I had a horse, I had a hat, I had boots, I had the fringed jacket, but I didn't know how to shoot a sharpshooter and be a sharpshooter like Annie Oakley. So one day I went to my father, who was kind of a weekend rancher, and he was painting a fence down in the back acreage of our little property. And I said, "Daddy, would you teach me how to shoot the .22? And he said, "Now?" And I said, "Yes, if I'm going to be Annie Oakley, I've got to know how to shoot the .22. And I was standing there in my hat, my boots, and my French jacket. So he went over to an area, trash can or something, and he picked up this can. It's not really the same can, but it's a can. And he said, "Okay." He said he went up to the house and picked up the old .22 out of this musty closet and got a couple of little bullets with copper tips. And he said, "Okay." And he walked over, probably about as far as the side of the stage, put it on a post, and he said, "Okay." He said, "Now, snug it into your shoulder and take a deep breath." Now, consider I was 8, okay? Take a deep breath, sight it in, and then squeeze, squeeze. And I started to squeeze, and it was heavy, and tears started running down my face. And I said, "Daddy, I'm scared." And he looked at me and he said, "Well, that's okay." He took the big old .22 out of my hand. And he said, "It's all right, you're a girl. You're little, you're young." And I said, "No, I'm just scared." And he said, "Well, then do it scared." So this can change my life, because as you can see, I was really a good shot. Bang! It went up into the air and I was hooked. I was hooked on doing something that most girls didn't do. He also asked me if I'd learned to whistle. He said, "You know, little girls really don't know how to be sharpshooters or whistle, but I'll teach you how to do both." But with that, it changed my perspective, that maybe I could compete at something. Maybe I could do something that maybe girls and boys didn't do, and that was, I was pretty good at shooting cans off a post. We moved from Utah, and I went to high school at a Centennial High School in Pueblo, Colorado, and remarkably, they had a rifle team, a girls' rifle team, and I was really good. I was a top shot. I was a sharpshooter, and when I graduated, I went to the University of Colorado as an athlete. There were no scholarships for athletes. In those days, they called us tom girls. Tom boys. Today, they call us Olympic hopefuls. But with that, I went to the University of Colorado. I got the degree in elementary education like my mother taught me to, so I could find a husband and support him to go to graduate school. Oh well, I didn't find one. But you know, my sophomore year in high school, John F. Kennedy was assassinated at 12:02 on November 23rd, 1963. And all of us, the entire country, wept. We all remembered what he had said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." And I decided, okay, no husband, I'm not ready to teach school, I'm going to Washington and I'm going to make a difference. I got a job with a congressman from Colorado through the help of the Dean of Women, who called him one day at my request and said, "I've got a girl here who's been real active on the campus, she's a terrific gal, I think you should hire her as a staffer." And he said, "Can she type?" We were all afraid of admitting we could type, because you ended up in a typing pool in the back of the room. But I knew that was my open door to the halls of Congress, so I admitted I could type. I was very good, but in about 2 months, a friend of mine, we were having lunch, and she said, "You won't believe this, but they're hiring female bodyguards for Tricia Nixon, the president's daughter." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yes." She said, they called the office and they were looking for young women who were interested. She said, "But I'd be scared to do that. You might have to die. They'll only pay you $7,000. But you do get to work at the White House and travel with the First Family." And she said, "But you have to be able to shoot a gun." I said, I can do that. He said, oh, no, you can't. I said, oh, yes, I can. I applied for the job and got it as one of the first 5 women, the first female agents in the United States Secret Service in the 100-year history of the Secret Service. There were 5 of us, and we broke holes in the glass ceiling and blew holes to all kingdom come. When they had never hired women in the FBI, there were no women allowed in the military, there were no women allowed in the Secret Service, which was the elite agency in Washington, D.C. We took our positions among the men. There were 5 of us, and there were 300 of them. The training was extensive. They gave me a gun, a .357 Magnum, and trained me how to shoot it, a badge, the big gold badge, a commission book that said I was on a mission for the President of the United States. They also gave me a pair of handcuffs, 6 extra rounds of ammunition, and of all things, an American Express card. This is the same card. Well, I've replaced it. It's kind of like the can, but. And if you read here, it says Kathryn C. Clark, or Childers rather, since 1971. Women couldn't get credit in 1971. You had to have a brother or a father or a husband sign on the dotted line to get a credit card. I went to Washington in my 1959 Volkswagen all by myself with my dad's Conoco card. Didn't know a soul, didn't have a place to live. But because I did it scared. Didn't have seat belts. That was really scary. But I ended up in Washington with this remarkable job, this remarkable responsibility. The code of the Secret Service was to protect and serve. And they protected and served the most important people in the United States, the president, the vice president, foreign heads of state who were visiting this country. They protected the children of John Kennedy until they were 16, John and Caroline. We were also trained in police work because when you weren't protecting someone, you were investigating crimes against our currency. After the Civil War, and that's why the Secret Service was part of the Treasury Department, after the Civil War, I've heard the figure of 50% of the currency in the United States was counterfeit. So they started this special Secret Service division to investigate counterfeit, and then they later assigned them to protect our leaders. Well, I had all sorts of training. It was extensive. It started out with the training of the guns, which I was pretty good at. In fact, at one point, one of the agents and I were making an arrest because it was ongoing training. We'd work on the job, and then we'd go to the Treasury Law Enforcement School, and we were making an arrest, and we were walking down the hall to make an arrest at the end of the hall, and Shaft was playing, and people were looking out the doors, and it was just this big man who had been, Charlie, had been a halfback for the Washington Redskins, and me, and we were going to make this arrest. And we go to the door, and we're banging on the door, Secret Service, open the door. And all you hear is this shuffle. And the word was always that you should go in quickly, or the contraband would be gone down the window, or out the window, or down the toilet, or whatever. You had to get in, and you had to get in quick. He looked at me, and he said, "You're so tough, you break down the door." And I looked at him, and I said, "You're so tough, you break down the door, and I'll shoot them. I'm a lot better shot than you are." So there was some issue with men who weren't really thrilled that we were there. I learned to not only shoot my .357 Magnum, but riot shotguns, Uzi submachine guns. I was trained in hand-to-hand combat, jiu-jitsu, and the mentality of protecting someone's life as a bodyguard, as a special agent. One night, they were sending us out on it was probably a training assignment for your head as much as anything. My partner and I were in a follow-up car to another training car, going through the Beltsville Training Center at high rates of speed, and our instruction was that we were to pull them over, a night stop. The night stops are absolutely the most frightening, and particularly now when you see all of the violence, the most frightening and challenging and dangerous assignment that police or agents or federal people in investigation make. We pulled up behind them and started screaming, Secret Service, pull over, and the car kept going. We could see, now these were instructors, we could see them in the car. They essentially kept going, and then all of a sudden they stopped in about 100 feet. We stopped, we pulled up right behind them, and the agent I was with, my partner, said, "This doesn't look right. Something's wrong." And I said, "Well, if it doesn't look right, it's probably not, but we didn't have time to think about it, and suddenly they pulled off again. We slid out of the car, just like Angie Dickinson, pulled out behind the door. They stopped. They threw their guns out the window. We thought it was over. When all of a sudden, I felt the cold steel of a revolver behind my ear. And the instructor said, "Bang, you're dead." What they had done is they pulled forward, they dropped the fellow out of the back seat in all the confusion. We didn't see it, and they came around and came up from the back, and both of us would have been dead that moment. I've never forgotten that, because you had to trust your gut. You had to play it by ear. You had to be trained. You had to be willing to do anything to protect the president and the vice president and former heads of state. Also, I was assigned to protect foreign heads of state, Golda Meir, Indira Gandhi. It was like being a mouse in the pocket of history. Here I was, 24 years old, from Pueblo, Colorado, and I was there because I could shoot a can off a post when I was a little girl and believed that doing it scared was my first step to courage and basically would jumpstart my brave. And I've probably been brave my whole life. Bottom line was I decided that being brave was kind of fun. It was interesting. It was exciting. Well, I actually left the Secret Service after my last experience with Caroline. And I had traveled with Caroline and John all over Europe, up and down the coast following the yacht Christina on 2 different summers, and then spent summers with her on the island of Scorpios, really on post, waiting for her to travel or planning for her travels. Went to a tennis and skiing camp with her in Austria and carried my blue flight bag with my .357 Magnum as we approached the slopes. See, everything I did had come to play, and I tell students, it's what's in your backpack. It's your degree. It's things that you don't know are in there. You look in there and go, oh yeah, I can ski. I can play tennis. Put me on the assignment that goes to a skiing camp in Austria. And time again, when I ask a student, what's one thing no one would believe about you? They say, nothing. But if you push them a little bit, there's always somebody's can in their backpack that they say, oh yeah, I can do this. It may be not the recognizable things on their resume or their application, but everybody has something in their backpack that they use. Strangely enough, the most exciting, and I would say interesting experience I had with Caroline was on a day when I was bringing her home from school. I would go to school with her in New York when I was assigned to the detail on occasion. And she came out as it was just Caroline and me, and I was her agent that day. She jumps in. She's 14. She's a teenager. And remember, the idea was that I was to keep them safe, to keep them alive, keep them happy, and keep them from embarrassing the President of the United States or their mother, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. They were teenagers. No problem. This was going to be easy. She jumps in the car, throws her backpack in, and says, I've got a tutor. I forgot to tell you. I'm tutoring about 18 blocks down First Avenue. And I said, Caroline, it's not on the schedule. She said, I don't care. We've got to tutor. So I threw it in first, and down we went First Avenue in my kind of armored black Secret Service car. And we're driving along, and she's giving the directions, as teenagers do. Oh, about 2 blocks, then turn left, turn right, and I'm doing everything I can to remember what she's saying and where we're going, and it brought to mind that the week before I'd been at sniper training. I'd been at a training camp where they taught us if someone comes in and hits your car, and then the folks up in the, that are the bad guys are pointing guns at you, and I mean, it can be like a complete effort to harm or to take your protectee. And we had just been planning what we would do. Here I was with my 14-year-old charge going down First Avenue. I checked the traffic coming toward me, turned through, there was nothing coming at me, turned left, and bam, I'm T-boned. And I looked at her, I screamed at her, get on the floor, get on the floor, pulled my service weapon out of my shoulder holster and jumped out of the car, checking first to see if there were any perpetrators up on the roof of the buildings around me, checking to see if there were other cars coming up to us, screaming at her to get down, when I looked at the car that had just T-boned me, and it was a 1959 Cadillac Seville. and it had been bondoed very badly. And the little fella came out kind of like this, a big tummy, suspenders, a little pork pie hat, and a cigar. It didn't look like what I thought a kidnapper would look like. And he comes up and he's happy. And I thought, kidnappers and assassins aren't supposed to look happy. I pulled my gun around to him and I said, "Secret Service, you're under arrest." And he looked at me and I pushed him over the top of the car and I had the gun on the corner of his ear. And I said, "You're under arrest." And he went, "Hey lady, you hit me, you hit me." It was a one-way street. And at that moment, I learned not only did I carry a gun, not only did I know jujitsu, I knew all those things, and then I had to be charming and have a sense of humor. I patted him on the head, put his little hat back on his head, and said, "Now, your car needs a little work, and I know the Secret Service is going to take care of it. Here's my card, and best of luck." Meanwhile, cars are jamming in, people are watching and gawking, and Caroline peeks up over the back seat and says, "You know, you're pretty good." Shortly after that, I saw Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis for the last time. Her husband had inspired me. She inspired me. She was a wonderful mother. She was the bravest woman I had ever met in my high school years, and I hadn't even met her, but we all knew what she had gone through with the assassination of her husband. And then to be a Secret Service agent in her presence and do the best I could to keep her children alive and safe was a compliment. We were walking down First Avenue, and she said, "You know, you live a most interesting life, Miss Clark." And I said, "Mrs. Onassis, it's only relative." And I said, "You know, doing something scared jumpstarts your brave. Stepping out of the boat is the only way you're ever going to walk on water." So I do it scared. I do the best I can one day at a time now, and I've never been more frightened with my husband having Alzheimer's. Now I'm his trophy caregiver instead of his trophy wife. Remember I told you that my father had said, "Do you want to learn how to whistle?" And someone said, "You ought to know how to whistle if you're going to do things if you're scared." And boy, did he teach me a whistle. Thank you very much.